It was a bright, beautiful afternoon in Los Angeles, the kind of day where the sunshine seems to make everything look like a movie scene. In one of the most expensive parts of the city, there sat a car dealership that didn't just sell cars, it sold a lifestyle. This wasn't a place where regular people went to buy a minivan for the family. This was a showroom for the super rich, the elite, and the famous. The floors were so clean you could see your reflection in them, and the air smelled like fresh leather and expensive coffee. The cars sitting in the showroom were not just vehicles, they were works of art, painted in bright reds, deep blues, and shiny silvers, each one costing more than most people earn in 10 years. The people who worked there knew exactly how to act. They wore tailored suits that fit perfectly, and they walked around with an air of importance, holding tablets and speaking in low, serious voices. Their job wasn't just to sell a car, it was to judge a person the moment they walked through the glass doors. They were trained to spot who had money and who was just there to dream. They looked at shoes, they looked at watches, and they looked at clothes. If you didn't look the part, you were practically invisible to them. On this specific afternoon, the dealership was buzzing with quiet energy. A few wealthy customers were walking around, holding glasses of champagne that the staff had offered them. It was a world of show-offs, where people wanted to be seen as much as they wanted to buy. But then, the automatic glass doors slid open, and someone walked in who immediately stuck out like a sore thumb. It was Keanu Reeves. Now, if you know anything about Keanu Reeves, you know that he is one of the biggest movie stars in the world. He has made billions of dollars with action movies and is loved by millions of people. But if you saw him walking down the street, you might not guess that. He doesn't act like a typical rich celebrity. He doesn't travel with a giant group of bodyguards, and he certainly doesn't dress up just to go outside. On this day, he looked more like a guy who had just woken up after a long nap. He was wearing a pair of old, faded blue jeans that had seen better days. His t-shirt was simple and plain, not a designer brand in sight. On top of that, he had a well-worn leather jacket that looked like he had been wearing it for years. To top it all off, he had a scruffy beard and a baseball cap pulled down low over his eyes. He didn't walk in with his chest puffed out, he walked in with his hands in his pockets, looking around with a quiet, humble curiosity. As soon as he stepped inside, the vibe in the room shifted, but not in a good way. The salespeople, who were busy flattering a customer in a shiny suit, stopped what they were doing for a split second to glance at the new arrival. They didn't see a movie star. They didn't see a man with millions in the bank. They saw a guy in old clothes who probably couldn't afford to buy a hubcap, let alone a luxury car. You could almost see the judgment in their eyes. They looked at his scuffed boots and immediately dismissed him. In their world, appearance was everything, and Keanu wasn't playing their game. Keanu, completely unaware of the dirty looks, didn't care about the champagne or the fancy suits. He was there for one reason: he genuinely loved cars. He wasn't looking for attention, he was looking at the machines. He walked slowly past the reception desk, giving a polite nod to the receptionist who looked at him with confusion, unsure if she should stop him or not. He ignored the whispers starting to bubble up among the staff as he moved deeper into the showroom. He made his way toward the back, where the most powerful sports cars were kept. There was a particular model, a high-performance machine known for its speed and handling, that caught his eye. Most people looked at these cars and saw a status symbol, a way to show off to their neighbors. But Keanu looked at it with the eyes of a child. He walked up to the car, his face lighting up with a genuine smile. He didn't touch the paint roughly, he gently placed his hand on the hood, feeling the cool metal. He leaned down to look at the wheels, checking the brakes with a focused intensity. He wasn't pretending, he knew what he was looking at. He appreciates engineering. He appreciates the hard work that goes into making a machine go fast. For a few minutes, he was just a car enthusiast admiring a beautiful piece of technology, completely in his own world. He didn't notice the group of salesmen gathering near the entrance, watching his every move with growing annoyance. To the staff, his behavior was confusing. Why was this scruffy guy looking so closely at the most expensive car on the floor? They assumed he was just a dreamer, someone wasting their time. They saw him leaning close to the glass to read the specs, and they laughed quietly among themselves. They pointed at his old jacket and made jokes about how he probably didn't have a license, let alone the money to lease the car. The lack of respect was palpable. The atmosphere, once friendly and inviting for the wealthy, had turned cold and hostile for the man standing by the sports car. But Keanu stayed in his happy bubble. He opened the door carefully, treating the car with the utmost respect, and sat inside the driver's seat. He gripped the steering wheel, adjusting the mirrors slightly, and imagined the feeling of the road. He wasn't taking selfies or bragging to anyone. He was just enjoying the moment. He sat there for a while, taking in the smell of the interior and the feel of the controls, looking completely at peace. Meanwhile, the sales manager, a man who took great pride in keeping the dealership exclusive, had had enough. He didn't like the image Keanu was presenting. He felt that a man in old, dirty clothes lowered the tone of the showroom. He thought it would scare away the real customers who had money to spend. The manager straightened his tie, put on his sternest face, and began marching across the pristine floor toward Keanu. The other staff members watched with smug grins, thinking they were about to see a show. Keanu was still sitting in the driver's seat, quietly appreciating the car, unaware that the manager was standing right outside the window, ready to ruin his day. The contrast was heartbreaking to witness. On one side, you had a genuinely good, humble man just appreciating art. On the other side, you had a man blinded by greed and superficiality, about to make a massive mistake. The sun was shining outside, but inside the dealership, a storm was about to break. The staff thought they were better than him, and they were about to learn a very expensive lesson about why you should never judge a book by its cover. The scene was perfectly set for a disaster. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone held their breath as the manager reached the car and tapped aggressively on the window, signaling for Keanu to get out. The peace of the afternoon was shattered, and the humiliating interaction was just seconds away from starting. Keanu, lost in his thoughts, looked up, startled by the harsh knocking, and turned to see the angry face staring back at him. This is where the trouble truly began. The sharp sound of knuckles rapping against the heavy glass window echoed through the quiet showroom. It wasn't a polite tap to get attention, it was a loud, aggressive bang that demanded obedience. Keanu Reeves, who had been sitting peacefully in the driver's seat, imagining the open road, was jolted back to reality. He looked up to see a tall man in a perfectly pressed suit standing outside the car with his arms crossed. The man did not look happy. He looked like a bouncer at a fancy club who had just spotted someone wearing sneakers. Keanu, being the kind of person he is, didn't get angry. He didn't roll his eyes or yell back. Instead, he simply opened the car door and stepped out, offering a small, apologetic smile. He assumed maybe he wasn't supposed to be sitting inside, or perhaps there was a rule he didn't know about. He treated the situation with respect, even though the way the manager was looking at him was full of disgust. "Hey there," Keanu said softly, closing the door gently. "Sorry about that. I was just checking it out. It's a beautiful machine. The manager didn't return the smile. In fact, his frown deepened. He looked Keanu up and down, his eyes pausing on the faded jeans and the old leather jacket. It was a look that said, "You don't belong here." The manager didn't care who Keanu was, he only cared about what Keanu looked like. And in his eyes, Keanu looked like trouble, or worse, a waste of time. "You can't just sit in the cars, sir," the manager snapped. His voice was loud enough that other customers in the showroom turned their heads to see what was happening. "These are high-end vehicles. They are not for joy rides." Keanu nodded, still trying to be polite. "I understand. I wasn't trying to take it for a ride. I was just looking at the interior. The stitching on the seats is really nice. And I was curious about the weight distribution in the chassis. It feels really balanced." Keanu wasn't trying to show off. He was genuinely talking about cars because he loves them. He knows a lot about engines and how cars handle. But the manager didn't want to hear it. He didn't believe a guy in old clothes could know anything about a luxury sports car. To the manager, Keanu sounded like someone trying to play a part, pretending to be a big shot. "Weight distribution," the manager laughed, a dry and mocking sound. He looked over at another salesman who was standing nearby, and they exchanged a knowing smirk. "Listen, pal, save the car talk for the mechanics. Why don't you head over to the used car lot down the street? I think they have a few rusty sedans that might be more your speed." The tension in the air grew heavy. The few other customers who were browsing nearby stopped looking at cars and started watching the confrontation. You could feel the awkwardness. It was uncomfortable to watch a grown man being bullied for no reason other than his clothes. But Keanu didn't flinch. He stood his ground, but he remained calm. He has dealt with enough drama in his life to know that getting angry usually makes things worse. "It's okay," Keanu said, his voice remaining steady. "I'm actually interested in this model. I've been reading about it. I was hoping to ask a few questions about the horsepower and the suspension tweaks for this year." The manager's face turned red. He was getting annoyed now. He felt insulted that this scruffy man was insisting he could buy the car. He took a step closer, invading Keanu's personal space, trying to intimidate him. The manager wanted to prove a point. He wanted to show everyone in the showroom that he was in charge and that he protected the brand from people he considered trash. "Questions?" the manager sneered. "I don't think you could afford the insurance on this car, let alone the monthly payments. Look at your boots. They're covered in dirt. You're tracking filth all over our clean floor." He pointed a finger at Keanu's chest. "We are trying to maintain a certain standard here. People come here to buy luxury, not to look at well, whatever it is you're supposed to be." It was a harsh thing to say. There was no reason for it other than pure cruelty. But the manager felt powerful. He felt like he was winning because he was making someone else feel small. He expected Keanu to get angry. He expected Keanu to yell or fight back. That would have given the manager an excuse to call security or have him arrested, but Keanu did the one thing the manager didn't expect: nothing. Keanu just stood there, looking at the man with a sad, patient expression. It was the look of someone who sees through the arrogance and feels bad for the person acting so foolishly. Keanu realizes that this man's happiness depends on putting other people down, and that is a sad way to live. "I just want to buy a car," Keanu said simply. "Does it matter what I'm wearing?" "It does when you scare off the real customers," the manager shot back. He gestured around the room. "Do you see anyone else here dressed like you know?" Because they have respect for the establishment. You look like you just crawled out from under a bridge. I'm asking you nicely, leave the car alone and leave the showroom. Keanu looked at the car one last time. He really did love it. But he also knew that he didn't want to give his money to people who treated others this way. It wasn't about the price anymore, it was about the principle. You don't treat people like dirt, no matter who they are or what they wear. Another salesman, a younger guy trying to impress the manager, stepped up to join the fun. Yeah, buddy, move along. Go find a bus stop or something. You're blocking the way for people who actually have money. The two of them laughed, thinking they were hilarious. They were feeding off each other's negativity, creating a toxic atmosphere that ruined the calm mood of the afternoon. Keanu looked at the younger salesman, then back at the manager. He realized there was no point in talking to them. Their minds were made up. They had judged him, found him guilty of being poor, and sentenced him to leave. They didn't know they were talking to a man who could buy the entire dealership with a single check, but that didn't matter. The damage was done. I see, Keanu said quietly. He didn't argue. He didn't say, "Do you know who I am?" He didn't pull out his phone to show them his movies. He just accepted their version of reality. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I'll leave. You're causing trouble just by breathing the same air as these cars, the manager muttered, turning his back on Keanu dismissively. Make it quick. And don't touch anything on your way out. The humiliation was complete. The staff had treated him like a criminal, yet he had done nothing wrong. The other customers were watching, some with whispered gasps, realizing how rude the staff was being. But nobody said anything. It was a moment of pure injustice. As Keanu turned to walk away, the manager shouted one final insult, ensuring that everyone knew who was boss. And don't come back until you win the lottery. The manager yelled out, causing a few chuckles from his staff. Keanu kept walking, his head held high, not giving them the satisfaction of seeing him upset. But the atmosphere in the dealership had changed completely. What started as a normal day had turned into a display of arrogance that was about to backfire in a very big way. The clock was ticking, and the manager had no idea that his worst nightmare was literally walking out the door. The situation in the showroom was getting worse by the second. The manager, who should have been acting like a professional, was letting his ego completely take over. He wasn't satisfied with just mocking Keanu's clothes. He felt a strange need to humiliate him in front of everyone else. It was like he wanted to prove to the other salespeople that he was the boss, that he had the power to kick anyone out. He took a step closer, getting right into Keanu's face, breathing heavily with anger. I didn't stutter, the manager barked, his voice echoing off the shiny car roofs. I said you are bothering the real customers. Look around you. Do you see anyone interested in you? No. They are interested in these cars, not some guy off the street pretending he knows about horsepower. Keanu stood perfectly still. He didn't back away, which seemed to annoy the manager even more. Keanu just looked at him, his face calm and unreadable. It takes a lot of patience to stand there and be yelled at without yelling back, but that is exactly what Keanu did. He could have easily gotten angry. He could have told them who he was and watched their jaws drop to the floor. But he didn't. He knew that his worth as a human being wasn't tied to a bank account or a designer suit. I'm just looking, Keanu said again, his voice soft but firm. I don't want any trouble. I was hoping to buy a car today, but if you don't want to sell me one, that is okay. I can go somewhere else. The mention of Keanu buying a car made the manager lose his cool completely. The manager laughed, a loud, sarcastic laugh that was meant to belittle. It was the kind of laugh that makes you feel bad for the person doing it because they look so foolish. Buy a car, the manager repeated, turning to the other staff members. Did you hear that, guys? This guy thinks he can buy a car. Look at him. You probably have $5 in your pocket. You couldn't afford the down payment on a bicycle, let alone this car. Stop playing games. Get out before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. The threat of calling the police was a low blow. It was a bullying tactic used just to scare Keanu. The other customers in the showroom stopped looking at the cars entirely now. They were all watching the drama unfold. It was uncomfortable to watch. A few of the wealthy customers actually started to frown. They could see that the manager was being unreasonable. Even though Keanu looked messy, he was acting like a gentleman, and the manager was acting like a thug. It was a clear reversal of roles. One of the younger salesmen, eager to impress his boss, grabbed a walkie-talkie from his belt and spoke into it loudly, making sure everyone could hear. Hey, security, we have a situation in the main showroom. Yeah, a vagrant. Trying to hassle the customers. Sending him out to the lot now. The use of the word vagrant was incredibly hurtful. It reduced a human being to a label. Keanu heard it, of course. How could he not? But he didn't react with anger. He didn't shout, "I am not a vagrant." He didn't defend his honor. He just looked at the ground for a second, a look of deep sadness crossing his face. It wasn't sadness for himself, it was sadness for the way people treat each other. He realized that these people had hearts so hard that they couldn't see the human being standing in front of them. Fine, Keanu said simply. He put his hands up in a peaceful gesture, showing he wasn't a threat. I am leaving. There is no need for security. I will walk myself out. The manager pointed a shaking finger toward the glass doors at the front of the building. You better walk. And don't come back. You are banned. If I see your face around here again, I will have you arrested. Keanu nodded slowly. Okay. Banned. Noted. He turned around and began the long walk across the showroom. With every step, the silence of the room grew louder. The sound of his old boots on the pristine floor seemed to echo like gunshots. The staff members watched him go, some with smirks on their faces, others shifting awkwardly, feeling that maybe this had gone too far. The manager stood with his chest puffed out, thinking he had won some great victory. He thought he had protected the dealership. He had no idea he had just destroyed the dealership's reputation. As Keanu walked past a group of customers looking at a red convertible, one of them, a woman wearing a diamond necklace, whispered to her husband, "That was unnecessary. He wasn't doing anything wrong." Her husband nodded, looking disgusted at the manager's behavior. The vibe in the room had changed from luxury to toxicity. It felt dirty now. The shiny cars couldn't hide the ugly behavior of the staff. Keanu didn't run. He didn't rush. He walked with his head up, maintaining his dignity until the very end. He refused to let them break his spirit. He reached the edge of the showroom floor where the carpet ended and the tile began. The manager followed him, hovering over his shoulder like a prison guard escorting an inmate. "Hurry it up," the manager barked. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." Keanu reached the tall glass automatic doors. He stepped toward them, expecting them to slide open smoothly like they did for everyone else. But for a moment, just to add to the humiliation, the sensors seemed to lag. It was only a split second, but it felt like an eternity. Keanu paused there, standing on the threshold of the outside world. The sunshine was blasting through the glass, waiting for him. Behind him, the sales staff started to high-five each other. They thought they were hilarious. They thought they had gotten rid of a nuisance. They were celebrating their own cruelty. "And stay out?" one of them yelled from across the room, followed by more laughter. But then, the doors finally slid open, as Keanu stepped out of the cool, air-conditioned showroom and into the bright California heat. He let out a long breath. It was a breath of relief. He was happy to be out of that negative energy. He was happy to be away from people who valued money over humanity. He adjusted his cap and looked toward the parking lot, ready to get into his own car and drive away. However, the moment he stepped out, the world outside the glass seemed to wake up. The street was busy. People were walking by on the sidewalk. And on the other side of the glass, inside the dealership, the celebration stopped instantly. It happened in a flash. A young woman who had just entered the dealership to ask about prices stopped dead in her tracks. She was standing right behind the manager, looking at the back of the man walking out. She saw his hair, his height, the way he walked. Her eyes went wide, and she grabbed her boyfriend's arm, squeezing it tight. She pulled out her phone instantly, her hands shaking with excitement. "Oh my God," she gasped, loud enough for the receptionist to hear. Is that Keanu Reeves?" The receptionist looked up from her computer, confused. "Who? That guy?" the girl whispered loudly, pointing at the glass doors. "The guy you just kicked out? That's Keanu Reeves? The actor?" Inside the showroom, the air suddenly vanished. The smirks on the salesmen's faces froze in place. The manager, who was still dusting off his suit as if he had just fought off a bear, stopped moving. He turned his head slowly toward the girl. "What?" the manager asked, his voice suddenly sounding very small. "That was Keanu Reeves?" the girl said, her voice rising in pitch. "You just kicked out Keanu Reeves?" Another customer, an older man who had been browsing quietly, pulled his glasses down to look at the door. He watched Keanu walking away. "I think she's right," the man said, his voice filled with disbelief. "That looks exactly like him." "What did you just do?" The color drained from the manager's face so fast he looked like he had seen a ghost. The reality of the situation hit him like a ton of bricks. He looked at the glass door, then at his staff, who were all looking at him with terror in their eyes. They all knew who Keanu Reeves was. They had all seen his movies. They had all just treated him like garbage. The panic began to set in. The manager's knees felt weak. He looked out the glass doors one more time. Keanu was already walking toward the street, getting further away. The everything changed moment had officially arrived. The dealership had won the battle of kicking the man out, but they had just lost the war of public opinion. And the worst part was, Keanu didn't even know they knew. He was just walking away, leaving them to drown in their own regret. The silence that filled the showroom was absolutely deafening. Just a few seconds ago, the room had been filled with the manager's loud, arrogant voice and the laughter of the sales staff. Now, it was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The air in the room felt heavy, like the weight of the sky had suddenly fallen on the roof. The young woman's voice was still ringing in everyone's ears. "That was Keanu Reeves?" The manager stood frozen near the glass doors, his hands still hovering in the air from where he had been pointing aggressively. His brain was trying to process what he had just heard, but it refused to accept it. He turned around slowly, his face twisted into a mixture of confusion and annoyance. He looked at the young woman who had spoken up, hoping she was joking. "What are you talking about?" the manager snapped, though his voice didn't have the same power as before. It sounded shaky now. "Keanu Reeves, the movie star, that guy, don't be ridiculous." The young woman didn't back down. She stepped closer to him, holding her phone up, showing a picture of the actor from a movie. Yes. That was him. Look at the jawline. Look at his eyes. That is Keanu Reeves? You just kicked Keanu Reeves out of your store. Another customer, an older man who had been watching the whole scene with a frown on his face, nodded his head vigorously. "She's right," he said, his voice loud and clear. "I know him when I see him. I saw him in a restaurant once. That is definitely him. You just made a huge mistake." The manager laughed again, but it was a nervous, trembling sound. "No, no way. Keanu Reeves is worth millions of dollars. Why would he be dressed like that?" He pointed toward the parking lot where the figure had disappeared. "That guy looked like he hadn't showered in a week. He was wearing a dirty jacket. Movie stars don't dress like that. That's the point," the young woman exclaimed, getting frustrated with the manager's stupidity. "He is famous for being humble. He doesn't care about fancy clothes. He rides the subway. He eats at regular diners. He was here because he loves cars, not because he wants to show off his money. And you treated him like trash." The reality check hit the other salespeople like a bucket of ice water. The young salesman who had mocked Keanu's boots turned pale white. He grabbed his own phone and quickly typed Keanu Reeves car dealership into a search engine, his fingers shaking. When he saw the photos of Keanu looking at cars, his stomach dropped. He looked at his manager with wide eyes. "Boss," the young salesman whispered, his voice cracking. I think she's right. I see pictures of him online. He dresses exactly like that guy. And he loves vintage bikes and fast cars." The manager looked at his employee, then at the other customers who were now staring at him with judgment and disgust. The tide had turned completely. 5 minutes ago, the manager was the king of the castle, and Keanu was the peasant. Now, the manager was the villain in a story that was about to go viral, and Keanu was the hero who had just walked away. The realization hit the manager's chest like a physical punch. He felt sick to his stomach. His heart started pounding so hard he could hear it thumping in his ears. He realized that he hadn't just been rude to a random customer. He had insulted one of the most beloved actors in the world. A man who could buy the entire franchise of dealerships without blinking. A man who had millions of fans who would be furious to hear how he was treated. I didn't know," the manager stammered, but nobody was listening. The damage was done. The customers in the showroom started muttering among themselves. "I'm not buying a car from these people," one woman whispered loudly to her husband. "Did you hear how they talked to him? Disgusting. They should be ashamed of themselves," another customer said, shaking his head. The panic really started to set in. The manager looked around his pristine showroom. The expensive cars, the marble floors, the fancy suits, it all felt fake now. He realized that his arrogance had just cost him big time. If Keanu Reeves walked out of there and told the story about how he was treated, the dealership's reputation would be ruined. No one would want to buy from a place that bullied celebrities. "We have to stop him," the manager blurted out. He looked toward the glass doors. Keanu was nowhere to be seen. He was already gone. "We have to go get him." The other staff members looked at each other, unsure of what to do. They were terrified. "What do we say, boss?" the young salesman asked. He looked really mad. "Well, not mad, but quiet. Just go. Go," the manager yelled, pushing the young salesman toward the door. The manager took off running. He didn't walk, he ran. He burst through the glass doors and out into the bright California sun, stumbling slightly as he hit the pavement. He looked left and right, frantically searching the street. The scene outside was busy. Cars were driving by, and people were walking on the sidewalk. But there was no sign of the man in the leather jacket. The manager felt a wave of despair wash over him. He had lost his chance. He turned to look back at the showroom, seeing the faces of the customers pressed against the glass, watching his panic. He felt like a fool. But then, he spotted him. About 50 yards down the street, near the entrance of a parking lot, he saw the familiar figure. Keanu was walking slowly, his hands in his pockets, looking at the ground as he walked. He didn't look back. He was just moving on with his day, completely unaware that the man who had kicked him out was now sprinting after him. "Wait! Wait!" the manager screamed, waving his arms in the air. He didn't care how crazy he looked. He didn't care about his dignity anymore. He just needed to fix this. "Mr. Reeves? Wait, please." He ran as fast as his dress shoes would allow, dodging a tourist on the sidewalk and nearly tripping over a curb. He was sweating through his expensive suit. His lungs burned. As he got closer, he could see Keanu slowing down. Keanu heard the shouting and turned around, a confused look on his face. When Keanu turned and saw the manager running toward him, he didn't look angry. He just looked surprised. He stopped walking and waited, standing there calmly on the sidewalk as the frantic manager approached. The contrast between the two men was striking. Keanu was still, quiet, and composed. The manager was messy, sweaty, and panic-stricken. The manager finally reached him, gasping for air, bending over to hold his knees. He took a moment to catch his breath, wheezing heavily. Keanu stood there, watching him with a look of genuine concern. He actually looked like he wanted to help the man, as if he thought the manager might be having a medical emergency. "Are you okay?" Keanu asked softly. The manager stood up straight, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked into Keanu's eyes and realized he was standing in front of greatness. The arrogance was gone. It had been replaced by pure, unadulterated fear. "Mr. Reeves," the manager choked out, his voice trembling. Please wait. I made a terrible mistake. I didn't recognize you. I didn't know who you were." Keanu looked at him for a long moment. He didn't speak right away. The wind blew his jacket slightly. Behind his sunglasses, you could feel him thinking. He knew exactly what was happening. He knew that the manager wasn't apologizing because he was sorry about his behavior. He was apologizing because he knew who Keanu was now. And that was the saddest part of all. "It's okay," Keanu said finally, his voice low. "I understand." "No, it's not okay," the manager interrupted, stepping closer. He was desperate now. He realized he had to offer something big. "Please, you have to come back inside. You can have the car. Seriously. The one you were looking at, you can have it. No charge. A gift. From us. Anything you want, just name it. We are so sorry." The manager was practically begging. It was a pathetic sight. The man who had been so powerful 10 minutes ago was now offering a free luxury car just to save face. He thought money could fix it. He thought that if he gave Keanu the car, Keanu would forget the humiliation. But Keanu Reeves isn't the kind of person who can be bought. And he certainly isn't the kind of person who forgets how he is treated. Keanu shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He looked past the manager, back toward the dealership. He could see the salespeople standing in the window, watching the show. He looked back at the sweating manager. He didn't get angry. He didn't yell. He just smiled a sad, small smile. "You know," Keanu said gently, "when I came in there, I just wanted to look at a car. I wasn't looking for a handout. I wasn't looking for special treatment. I just wanted to be treated like a human being." The manager nodded his head furiously. I know. And we failed. We failed miserably. But please, let me make it right. The car is yours. We can do the paperwork right now, please, Mr. Reeves?" The silence on the street was heavy. The traffic roared in the background, but for these two men, the world had narrowed down to this one conversation. The manager was waiting for Keanu to say yes. He thought everyone has a price. He thought the greed would win. But he was about to learn a lesson that money couldn't teach. The manager stood there with his mouth slightly open, his chest heaving up and down as he tried to catch his breath. He was waiting for Keanu to smile, to shake his hand, to say something like, "Wow, really a free car? That is what most people would do." That is what the manager would have done if he were in Keanu's shoes. He thought money fixed everything. He thought a free luxury sports car would instantly erase the memory of being humiliated. But Keanu didn't smile. In fact, his expression didn't change at all. He looked at the manager with eyes that were calm and steady. He wasn't angry, but he was very serious. He looked at the man who had insulted him just 10 minutes ago, and he saw right through him. He saw a man who was controlled by fear and greed. "Thank you for the offer," Keanu said, his voice soft but clear over the noise of the street traffic. "But I can't accept it." The manager blinked. He shook his head in confusion. "What? Why, it's free, Mr. Reeves? You don't have to pay a cent. It's the best car we have. It's worth $200,000. I'll sign it over to you right now." "It's not about the price," Keanu said gently. He adjusted the strap of his bag on his shoulder. "The problem isn't that I can't afford the car. The problem is that you didn't want to sell it to me when you thought I was just a regular guy." The manager's face turned an even deeper shade of red. He looked around nervously, hoping nobody on the street was listening, but people were starting to stare. I made a mistake," the manager stammered. "I told you. I didn't recognize you. I didn't know." Keanu took a small step closer. He wasn't trying to be intimidating, but his presence was strong. "Does it matter who I am?" he asked. The question was simple, but it hit the manager like a heavy weight. "If I wasn't Keanu Reeves, if I was just a guy who worked hard and saved up his money to buy a nice car, would you be running after me right now? Would you be offering me a free car?" The manager opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He wanted to lie, but he couldn't. The honest answer was no. If Keanu was just a normal person, the manager would have let him walk away and then laughed about it with his friends for the rest of the day. "Exactly," Keanu said, reading the manager's silence. "You judged me by my clothes. You looked at me and decided I wasn't good enough. That hurts. It hurts whether I'm rich or poor. I just wanted to be treated with respect. You didn't give me that. And now, you're trying to give me a car to make yourself feel better. You aren't apologizing because you're sorry you were mean. You're apologizing because you know who I am. The manager felt small. Incredibly small. Standing there in his expensive suit on the sidewalk, he felt like a child being scolded by his teacher. He realized that Keanu Reeves had more class in his little finger than the entire management team of the dealership had in their whole bodies. The actor wasn't asking for special treatment, he was just asking for basic human decency. And the dealership had failed the test. So, please, Keanu continued, putting a hand on the manager's shoulder for a brief second and patting it. Keep the car. Sell it to someone who loves it. Just, maybe next time, try to be a little nicer to people who walk through your door. You never know who they are. With that, Keanu turned around. He didn't wait for a reply. He didn't wait for another apology. He just turned and started walking back toward the parking lot where he had left his own vehicle. The manager stood frozen, watching him go. He wanted to run after him again, to beg on his knees, but his feet felt like they were made of lead. He knew it was over. He had missed his chance. Keanu walked at a steady pace. He didn't look angry. He didn't look triumphant. He just looked like a man who was ready to go home. He reached the parking lot and walked toward a dusty, old car parked in the corner. It was a classic car, a bit beat up, but it was clear it was well loved. It was the kind of car you drive because you love driving, not because you want to show off. A group of tourists nearby recognized him and started pointing and whispering, but they didn't swarm him. They respected his space. Keanu gave them a polite nod, opened the door of his car, and slid inside. The engine started with a healthy roar. He checked his mirrors, put his seatbelt on, and slowly pulled out onto the street. As he drove past the dealership, he didn't even look at the showroom window. He just kept his eyes on the road. He was leaving the negativity behind him. He didn't need their car. He didn't need their apology. He had his dignity, and that was something they could never take away from him. Back at the dealership, the manager was still standing on the sidewalk, sweating. He watched Keanu's car disappear around the corner and let out a long, shaky sigh. He felt sick. He turned around slowly and began the long walk back to the glass doors. The worst part was going back inside. When the automatic door slid open, the showroom was deadly quiet. The sales staff were all standing around, looking at him with wide eyes. The customers who had witnessed the scene were shaking their heads. The vibe in the room had completely changed. The luxury feeling was gone. It just felt like a place where bad people worked. Did he come back? One of the salesmen whispered. The manager shook his head, walking straight to his office without looking at anyone. No, he said quietly. He's gone. The mood in the dealership plummeted. The customers started to leave. One by one, they walked out, shaking their heads in disappointment. They didn't want to buy cars from bullies. The young salesman who had made the rude comment about the boots looked at his shoes and felt terrible. He realized he had acted like a jerk, and for what, to impress a boss who was now hiding in his office. By the end of the day, the story was already spreading. The young woman who recognized Keanu had told her friends, who told their friends. By the next week, it would be all over the internet. People would boycott the dealership. The manager would eventually lose his job. And all because they judged a book by its cover. Keanu, on the other hand, went about his life. He didn't go on TV to talk about it. He didn't post a mean video online. He just kept being himself. He treated everyone with kindness, regardless of who they were or what they wore. That is the real lesson of the story. It doesn't matter how much money you have, what kind of car you drive, or how expensive your suit is. None of that matters if you don't have a good heart. The manager had a showroom full of expensive cars, but he was the poorest person in the city because he lacked respect. Keanu Reeves wore old clothes and drove an average car, but he was the richest man in the city because he had character. And at the end of the day, character is the only thing that truly matters. The dealership lost a customer that day, but they gained a lesson they would never forget. Treat everyone you meet with kindness, because you never know when you might be talking to a hero.